Something's just not right, you know? Max Verstappen's voice crackled through the airwaves, his usual cool demeanor replaced by a palpable sense of frustration. The reigning Formula One world champion had just climbed out of his Red Bull car after a roller coaster of a race at the Austrian Grand Prix, and the cracks in his team's armor were starting to show. It wasn't the clash with Lando Norris that had Verstappen so riled up. No, the source of his ire lay much deeper, within the very team that had carried him to the heights of the motorsport success. As he vented his concerns about the sudden lack of pace in the final stint, it became clear that the young Dutchman's patience was wearing thin. "I was just baffled by the sudden lack of pace in the final stint," Verstappen said, his brow furrowed in a rare display of emotion. "I don't know what happened, but something was clearly not right with the car." It was a damning assessment, one that laid bare the issues within the Red Bull operation. Verstappen, known for his measured responses, seemed more annoyed discussing his team's mistake than the incidental with Norris. The message was clear. The frustration had been building for some time. This wasn't the first time Verstappen had voiced his concerns about his team's performance. Earlier in the season, he had been highly critical of Red Bull's strategy, disastrous pit stops, and overall lack of pace. It was a stark contrast to the confident, dominant driver who had stormed to the championship the previous year. The truth was, Red Bull's once dominant advantage in Formula One had been steadily eroding. The team that had seemed unbeatable just a season ago was now struggling to keep pace with their rivals, and Verstappen was feeling the strain. This was the most stark demonstration yet of a trend that's been growing and growing, observed one seasoned F1 analyst. Red Bull's superiority is no longer a given, and Verstappen is starting to feel the weight of that. Indeed, even a small pit stop delay in Norris's fresher tires had been enough to put Verstappen under immense pressure. The reigning champion, who had once seemed untouchable, was now having to fight tooth and nail for every position. The clash with Norris added another layer of complexity to the situation. The young Briton was unsparing in his assessment, criticizing Verstappen's driving as a bit reckless and a bit desperate. Verstappen, for his part, acknowledged that crashes can happen when fighting for the lead, but suggested that he and Norris would move on from it. Still, the tension was palpable, and the two drivers would likely need to have a frank discussion to clear the air. It was a testament to Verstappen's competitive spirit that he was willing to go toe-to-toe with Norris, even as his own team struggled to keep up. But the strain was starting to show, and the question was how long he could continue to cover for Red Bull's shortcomings. As the paddock packed up and headed to the next race, the spotlight remained firmly on Verstappen and his Red Bull team. The reigning champion's outburst had laid bare the cracks in the team's armor, and the pressure was on to address the underlying issues. For Verstappen, the stakes couldn't be higher. He had staked his reputation on Red Bull's success, and now he found himself in the unenviable position of having to cover for his team's shortcomings. The question was, how long could he continue to do so before the cracks became too wide to ignore? It was a dilemma that Verstappen had faced before, albeit in a different context. During his early days in Formula One, the young Dutchman had been known for his aggressive, most reckless driving style. But as he matured and honed his skills, he had learned to temper that aggression, becoming a more well-rounded and consistent driver. Now, it seemed he was facing a similar challenge with his team. Red Bull had been his home since the beginning, the place where he had blossomed into a world champion. But as the cracks began to show, Verstappen found himself in a precarious position, torn between his loyalty to the team and his desire to win. It's a tough situation for sure, Verstappen admitted. Red Bull has been with me through thick and thin, and I owe them a lot. But at the end of the day, I am a racer and I want to win. I can't keep covering for their mistakes forever. As the season progressed, the pressure on Verstappen and Red Bull only intensified. The team's struggles continued with a string of disappointing results and technical issues that left the reigning champion visibly frustrated. "It's just so frustrating, you know," Verstappen said after another race where he had been forced to settle for a lower position than he felt he deserved. "We should be dominating this championship, but instead, we're constantly playing catch up." The cracks in Red Bull's armor were becoming harder and harder to ignore, and Verstappen found himself in the unenviable position of having to defend his team's shortcomings to the media. As the season reached its midpoint, it was clear that something had to give. Verstappen's patience was wearing thin, and the team's struggles were starting to take a toll on his own performance. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," Verstappen admitted. "I'm giving it my all, but it's just not enough. Something has to change, and it has to change soon." The question was, what would that change look like? Would Verstappen be forced to consider his options to look elsewhere for a team that could provide him with the resources and support he needed to truly thrive? Or would Red Bull be able to find a way to address their issues and recapture the magic that had made them so dominant in the past? As the paddock headed to the next race, the tension was palpable. All eyes were on Verstappen and Red Bull as the world waited to see how the reigning champion and his team would respond to the mounting pressure. For Verstappen, the stakes couldn't be higher. He had invested so much of himself in Red Bull's success, and the thought of walking away from the team that had given him his big break was almost unthinkable. But as the cracks continued to widen, he knew that he couldn't keep covering for their mistakes forever. The future hung in the balance, and the world of Formula One held its breath, waiting to see how this high-stakes drama would unfold.